that, please.
Thank you, Linda. So tonight we're going to be talking about rights, rights which come from legislation and rights which are inherent and self-evident. Property rights are extraordinarily important in our capitalist economic system, but they're not inherent rights and should arise from just laws. We remember tonight that the ancestors of the Anishinaabe people, the Odawa or Ottawa, the Ojibwe or Chippewa, and the Potawatomi or Potawatomi lived here in what we call Southeast Michigan for 10,000 years until the Europeans arrived with guns and took the land by force. We remember the people who lived here before, and we remember the injustices that were done to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So I'd just like to start by giving an overview of our group. We started about 20 years ago as a reaction to the Iraq War, and we've been going strong ever since. We're dedicated to the cause of peace and justice, and we've been doing that with demonstrations and actions and speakers and joining with other groups whenever we can that are also dedicated to those causes. And although our name is Huntington Woods, our membership is from throughout Southeast Michigan. We just happen to have started in Huntington Woods. And over the years, we've had many speakers. We do have a speaker every month. They've included Tom Hayden, Daniel Ellsberg, Abdul Sayed, Phyllis Bennis, Jeff Cohen, Norman Solomon, Representative Andy Levin, who we like to have often, and many other journalists and politicians, academics, and activists. For the entire year since George Floyd was killed, we've had a racial justice demonstration on the corner of 11 and Woodward every Monday, and it starts at 5:30. And we did take a break during the bad weather, but we're back out there now. And we had quite a turnout on Monday, and I can't help but believe that was because of the tragic killing in Buffalo over the weekend. So, as you can see, the sad story of racial injustice and prejudice continues, and it's really up to us to keep that cause alive on our part and be out there speaking up for racial justice. And what you'll find if you join us is that the cars down Woodward are really in support. I mean, it is an amazing experience. The honking is like crazy, was even more now, and it turns out to be a really inspirational type of experience. So we would welcome you. Again, you just show up, it's at 5:30, and we have lots of signs. And that brings us to tonight's meeting, which is on another issue that's been with us for a long time, and that's reproductive rights. And it's taken quite an urgent turn in just the last few days with the leak of the Supreme Court draft decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. We wanted to take up this urgent issue to get the best information that we can, to better understand it, and take action that will really make a difference. So we're delighted to have two outstanding speakers tonight. We're honored to host retired distinguished Wayne State University Law School professor Robert Sedler, who's an expert in constitutional law and civil rights law. Professor Sedler is actually no stranger to the battle for reproductive rights. While he was teaching at the University of Kentucky prior to the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision, he filed suit along with the Kentucky ACLU to overturn Kentucky's abortion ban. And their efforts were unsuccessful, but the US Supreme Court decision in Roe immediately threw out every state's abortion ban. Today, he's intimately involved with the Michigan ACLU and its efforts to collect signatures for a ballot that would amend the Michigan Constitution and incorporate Roe versus Wade. And he's worked on the proposal with the ACLU. And then our other speaker, our second speaker, is Ann Mullen, who is the communications director for the Michigan ACLU. Ann joined ACLU of Michigan as communications director in 2017, after serving more than 2 decades as an investigative journalist in both print and broadcast news. She started her career at the Detroit Metro Times, where she worked for more than 7 years covering city politics and policing and neighborhood issues, winning numerous awards. And then she went to work for Channel 7, WXYZ in Detroit, as executive producer of the investigative team, which earned many awards as well, including the Alfred I. DuPont Columbia University Award, which is the highest honor in broadcast journalism. She later served as managing editor of the newsroom for Channel 7 for 3 years. So we're very delighted to have both of you. We're excited about it. And what we're going to do is hear from both speakers, one after the other, and then we'll open up for questions. So as you think of questions, please put it in the chat room, and then Melanie will um, monitor the questions and ask them of our guests at the end of the presentation. So let's start with Professor Sedler. You want to take it from here? Okay, Bob?
Okay, everything has changed since yesterday. We started with Michigan because that is what affects us and Michigan women most directly. Elizabeth Gleicher is a former student at Wayne State. She was in my con law class in 1977, the first class I took. We've worked on a number of projects at ACLU, very good friends. We exchanged congratulatory emails yesterday. She ruled that sitting as a court of claims judge, that the Michigan Constitution protects bodily privacy. She wrote a very, very thorough opinion, very well precedented with doctrine and precedents, demonstrating why the value of bodily privacy is embodied in the Michigan Constitution. And a ban on a woman having an abortion, compelling a woman, to use my term, to be an involuntary incubator, to go through significant bodily changes and life changes, is just intolerable and is inconsistent with the value of personal freedom and bodily integrity. She issued a preliminary injunction against the enforcement of this 1931 anti-abortion law. Another former student of mine and colleague, Dana Nessel, with whom I worked very closely in our successful challenge to Michigan's ban on marriage equality, has said she will not appeal the decision. So at some point, there will be a final injunction. I'm very optimistic, being realistic, that the Michigan Supreme Court, when the case gets up there, will affirm. You have 4 Democratic candidates, members of the court, at least 1 reasonable Republican, maybe 2, depending on how you count. So I think that realistically, the overruling of Roe v. Wade will not have an impact in Michigan. Now, there are broader issues, and Ann will talk about them. But I want to talk about the immediacy and what's going to happen with Roe v. Wade in the rest of the country. It's very clear from the Alito draft opinion that a 5-justice majority is going to overrule Roe v. Wade. There's just no doubt about it. What they will say is, well, it's really up to the states, that they can weigh the inconvenience to a woman of having to carry a pregnancy against, quote, the destruction of potential life, and that the states can decide to favor the interest in potential life over the interest of the living woman. Again, it's just inconceivable and intolerable to me, but that was true 50 years ago, and these attitudes are very, very strong. I respect the pro-life view. Of course, I disagree with it, But I think that the Supreme Court majority is not simply deciding an abstract constitutional question. I think they are very much on the side of pro-life. They are not sympathetic to women who want to have a safe and legal abortion. They're not going to say that, but they're going to put it in terms of states' rights and the democratic process. And that realistically, in the United States, we are, to borrow a thing from the Civil War, half slave and half free. Better than half the states will prohibit abortion or severely restrict it, and they are doubling down. I think the legislators are convinced that the public supports them. They will prohibit women from having an abortion. You do it by prohibiting doctors from performing abortions. Doctors would face criminal penalties and the loss of their medical license. So in these 27 or 28 states, abortion will be completely, or to a very large extent, illegal. I am very concerned about what's going to be said in the opinion. It is possible that the court will try to ameliorate it, suggesting some other possibilities. Most importantly is the right of travel. The right of travel is a basic generic right, so fundamental to a national union that it wasn't put in the Constitution. Supreme Court said this in 1845. More recently, the court said that the right to travel is part of the privileges and immunities of American citizenship. Now, you have a few states proposing to make it a crime for a woman to go to another state and get an abortion. Now, clearly, that violates the constitutional right to travel. It is very possible, though I think unlikely, that in the Alito opinion, he will talk about the right to travel and say that women can go to another state and have an abortion. Now, realistically, that's easy for middle-class women. Much more difficult for lower-income women. But yet, even in this, with abortion being allowed, those states, and including Michigan, by the way, prohibit Medicaid funding for abortion. I am assuming, to use my term, that rich liberals, Michael Bloomberg, let's say maybe Jeff Bezos and the like, will come together with money, and that there will be funding for women to go to other states and have abortion. We've seen some of that in Texas. I mean, there's no indication that Texas women have been unable to get to neighboring states and have an abortion. That's one issue. Secondly, medication abortions. About 50% of abortions are medical substance. I guess I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's medicated abortions, which is sufficient for up to 10 weeks. Now, I think states, the red states, will try to ban medicated abortions. You get a question there of federal preemption. The Food and Drug Administration has authorized medicated abortions. They can make it more liberal, make it easier for women to obtain. It is possible for the court to say, though again, I don't think it will, that the decision does not affect Medicaid abortions, that that's up to the federal government, and the federal law preempts state law. That's another possibility. The crucial thing, when Roe v. Wade is overruled, and it will be overruled, and abortion will be illegal in half of the states, is that those of us who support reproductive freedom do what we can to enable women to go to other states and obtain a safe and legal abortion. And the blue states, and California is a good example, New York is another example, are trying to expand the abortion clinics to accommodate women coming from other states. What is the best thing that we can hope for if we support reproductive freedom is that in about half the states, abortion will be fully legal, nothing will change, and Michigan, I'm optimistic, will be one of those states. The efforts have to be made to ensure that women who are in red states that prohibit abortion are able to get to blue states, if you will, and obtain a safe and legal abortion. Way back in 1970, the state of New York legalized abortion 3 years before Roe v. Wade. And women from all over the country would be coming into New York to obtain a safe and legal abortion. But again, those are middle-class women who could afford to do so. Hopefully today, with greater awareness, there will be support to enable women living in red states, anti-choice states, to go to blue states, choice states, and obtain a safe and legal abortion. I think the best outcome that we can hope for, and I guess I keep repeating myself on that, but dealing with the realities of it, that women, wherever they live, in states that have banned abortion, will be able to come to states that allow abortion and obtain a safe and legal abortion. Now, the final point, talked about the constitutional right to travel. Congress has the power to regulate interstate commerce. A ban on abortion has a significant effect on interstate commerce. Namely, it forces women in states that do not allow abortion to travel to states that do. The precedents would make very clear that Congress's power over interstate commerce allows it to regulate local activity that viewed cumulatively has a substantial economic effect on interstate commerce. All the lower courts that have passed on, it hasn't gone to the Supreme Court, have upheld the freedom of access to clinic entrances, to block Operation Rescue and other groups that interfere with the ability of women to access abortion clinics. Again, I think the doctrine is very clear that Congress has the power to protect abortion under its power to regulate interstate commerce. That's the easiest part. But again, this means realistically that the Democrats are going to have a majority in the House and plus a majority in the Senate, given a few recalcitrant Democrats, and will have to be willing to repeal the filibuster rule. I strongly suspect that the Supreme Court justices, here I'm speculating, will assume that the Democrats will not be able to do that and that their decision will stand. So the fact that the Democrats in Congress could use this to protect freedom to obtain abortion, I think is very unrealistic from the political situation. So I end with, we're going to be free in Michigan. I'm very optimistic, apart from anything else, that the Michigan Supreme Court, when it comes to it, will uphold Judge Gleicher's interpretation of the Michigan Constitution. Beyond that, I think the crucial question is whether there will be the necessary support, financial and otherwise, to enable women living in states that prohibit abortion to get to a state that allows it and have a safe and legal abortion there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. It was a good review of the situation. And now, Anne, we're going to turn to you for your comments.
Sure. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for inviting me to attend today. I so appreciate it, and giving the opportunity to talk about the work the ACLU is doing. As Bob had mentioned, and again, just to reintroduce myself, Ann Mullen, Communications Director of the ACLU of Michigan, and Bob is an old friend as well. When I was a reporter, I would often turn to him when decisions like this would happen, and seek his his interpretation of them. So it's really nice to see Bob again tonight. So a couple things. So the ACLU is it's been a very intense period with this looming threat. And then of course, with the leaked draft ruling from the US Supreme Court, which was what we expected. It was devastating for our nation just to see this, for all of us. But one thing I just really want to be clear in Michigan, as Bob had said, that there is a lot to be hopeful for. Since that leaked decision, the ACLU has just seen an immense amount of support for our ballot measure, which I'll describe a little bit more. I'm sure many of you know about it, and I'll explain how you can all get involved. But in the course of the night that was released, we all gathered together and started, making a plan. And as we were doing that, our volunteer engagement strategist was looking at the numbers on our website, which is our folks who want to check it out and should check it out, is myreproductivefreedom.org. And my is MI Michigan. But we just started seeing people signing up, and it was 300, then 700, then 900. Anyway, as of today, we're over 30,000 people around the state have signed up to volunteer and to help us get this ballot measure on the November 8th ballot. It's called our campaign, and our ballot measure is called Reproductive Freedom for All. We did not enter into this lightly. We have been evaluating this for months. We met with experts. We met with reproductive justice community. We met with medical providers of abortion care. We met with impacted people. We met with experts from national to the state level, legal experts, to put together what eventually became the constitutional amendment we're hoping to get passed come November 8th. So in that effort, again, as I said, the hope is that we need to, and donations, by the way, have also been pouring in. Of course, all of it is fantastic. It gives us a lot of hope. We're very super mission focused, and I feel confident we're going to get the 425,059 signatures we need to get this done. And we need those by July 11th. That's when we'll submit them to the Secretary of State, and they'll review them over a period of time to ensure all of our signatures are valid, which actually means we need to collect about 625,000 signatures to ensure that we get enough that are valid, because the opposition is going to challenge us like crazy to try to keep this off the ballot. So right now, our mission, we're having fundraisers regularly. We're out on the streets. We're engaging volunteers around the state to circulate petitions. And we just are working really hard to get those signatures so that we can move forward. And we're feeling pretty good about it. We don't have a final number. We're going to look as they keep coming in. We'll evaluate by the end of the week. But we know just in this past weekend, on May 14th, we had the events all over the state that one volunteer event, like they immediately within hours had 1,000 signatures. So we feel really confident that we'll get there. But of course, we cannot let up, and we don't do this alone. Of course, we do it with your support. We do it with people from all over the state. And I do feel very confident that Michigan is going to be a beacon of hope, as Bob said. We are in not just with this litigation that will ensure that this ban, this 1931 law that we got the great ruling from Judge Glacier yesterday, but that the state Supreme Court will also see that our state, that the Constitution protects abortion in our state. So we're fighting on two fronts, which is the litigation that Bob had mentioned, and we're fighting on this other front with ensuring that reproductive freedom, all things related to childbirth, whether it's miscarriage care, abortion care, contraception, birth control, prenatal care, childbirth, it is all enshrined in amendment in our Constitution. That is our goal. And we are the only state in the nation doing this, putting it to the voter to say we need to amend our Constitution and enshrine it. So the litigation, of course, is fantastic, and we've got that great victory yesterday, but we are working on both fronts to ensure that Michigan is protected. And we are the only state in the nation doing this. And when I'm out personally collecting signatures, I try to inspire people and say, you know, we are going to be a beacon of hope for this nation, for states that are, as Bob said, there's like 25 to 27 other states that are going to lose this right. Michigan was one of them until yesterday with this preliminary injunction that was granted by Judge Glacier, but that we can be a model for other states to do the same. And the ACLU has 54 affiliates around the nation, including Puerto Rico. And we're hearing from other states that are going to lose abortion. We're hearing from our affiliate friends saying, like, they're just rooting for us so that we can be that model and beacon of hope. But again, I just want to inspire all of you to do anything you can to circulate petitions. And just even you can get 10 signatures per sheet. Just talk to your friends, circulate them. And as I was saying earlier before everybody joined, that we'll get them to you. You can go on to, again, it's reproductivefreedom.org and sign up, and we'll get a petition to you. We'll mail them to you. We'll come to your home. We'll drop them off, or we'll tell you where you can pick them up. But just sign up like the 30,000 or so others who have done so, because we really need everybody pushing together to make this happen. Also, that what Bob had mentioned about, it will be much easier for privileged people who have the means to leave the state to get an abortion. But why this is so important, and so important to the ACLU, is protecting reproductive freedom for all is especially vital for marginalized communities who we know will face the brunt of the rollback of our constitutional rights. Right now, Black women are already 3 times more likely than white women to die during childbirth, and Detroit's maternal death rate is 3 times higher than the national average. Black women, those facing economic hardships, young people, people living in rural communities will be hit hardest when Roe is overturned, which we, as Bob said, we all expect that to happen. I know all of you, if it's that draft opinion is anything that looks like anything, the final decision, we know that the country's in trouble. So Michigan, we are working incredibly hard, and we're working with our coalition partners. It's us, Michigan Voices, and Planned Parenthood of Michigan together, this coalition, this come together to put together this ballot measure. And we're working very hard with our national partners and people throughout the state to ensure that this gets done. But we want to be sure that we can enshrine this in our Constitution. So no matter who's in office, who's elected, who sits on the Supreme Court bench, that this is in our Constitution. It's a move to protect abortion rights and reproductive freedom for all for generations to come. So I just encourage everyone, My email, even if you want to just contact me directly, again, I'd be happy to, get folks, I'll drive to your house and get you a petition to circulate, show you how to do it. But just so you all have it, and I can drop this in the chat too, it's A Mullen, MULLEN at ACLU, ACLUMich.org. And again, that's A Mullen at ACLUMich.org. Yep, there it is. Thank you so much. I also wanted to let you know too, tonight on MSNBC, our Deputy Legal Director, Bansitu Kitaba, will be on live at 9:30, talking about our ballot measure, talking about yesterday's ruling. She's our chief litigator in concert with Planned Parenthood and Michael Steinberg's group from the U of M student, I think it's student constitutional group that's working together on this litigation. So she'll be talking about that tonight. And couple other things I wanted to mention is that one of the threats that we suspect we might see as a result of yesterday's ruling is that the legislature might come forward and now, put together the legislation to ban abortion in Michigan. We can expect the governor will certainly veto that, but it's those sorts of threats. They also, as I understand, could enter into our litigation as a defendant and challenge and try to appeal Judge Gleischer's ruling. That would take some time, and there'd have to be, approval of that to happen. But we're just looking at the possible threats as we go along in this litigation as well. But again, we had just a fantastic ruling yesterday, and we are extremely happy about that. And it is a great victory. However, we don't want people to let up, and that we need to keep fighting so that we preserve this in our Constitution with our reproductive freedom for all ballot measure. So we're fighting on two fronts. We're not going to stop fighting, and we want to just invite everyone to do as much as they can to continue to protect this sacred right. So thanks.
Thank you. So one question so far in the chat about federal legislation guaranteeing the right to abortion all across the country. What can we do to make a move to make that happen? You or Bob can answer that. And Bob, you'll have to unmute yourself to answer.
For that, it's only going to happen if the Democrats control both houses of Congress and are willing to kill the filibuster in the Senate. I would not count on it.
Okay. That's the only question that was in the chat. If you would like to raise your hand, there is an option to do that under reactions. You can raise your hand, or you can just wave wildly, but we have 2 pages, and if your video is off, I won't see you waving wildly. So anything else? Any comments, questions? Yes, Linda, go ahead.
I have a question, which is, what's the likelihood that other states will follow Michigan's model to get an amendment to their state constitutions in this way?
Well, the ACLU, one of the things that we're looking at, and there's, national strategy and looking at the various states and the various situations they're in. But the hope is that we do this ballot measure, and when we win, we run 4 or 5 other campaigns around the country. But we'll obviously be really strategic about where we think we can do that. But that's the aim, is to continue to fight at this level. But this is the test, and it's super exciting. But I really think that we can be a model for others. So that's the hope.
There are 2. See, Michigan is a state where the Constitution is close to the people. The Constitution can be amended by a ballot initiative with sufficient signatures and a majority vote. Only some states have that provision. I think Wisconsin does. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's right, Bob.
Pardon?
I think that's right. Yeah.
I know they have a restrictive anti-abortion law. Then, of course, there are the state courts. There's always the state constitution. But in the red states, there's a suit in Oklahoma, for example. In the red states, you tend to have conservative judges who are not likely to interpret the state constitution as protecting abortion rights. There was a time when the Michigan Supreme Court would not have interpreted the Constitution as protecting abortion rights. So stated simply, I am not optimistic that there would be legislative or constitutional or ballot changes in any state other than Michigan. Maybe Wisconsin, but other than that, the states that are supportive of reproductive freedom don't have anti-abortion legislation. So that's why I think that the matter of enabling people to get to free states, literally, is very important. And I'm anxious to see, curious to see whether the Alito opinion will talk about the right of interstate travel. Again, you don't know what's in the heads of people, and they vary. Are they trying to really stop abortion? Or are they trying to render a decision that is, quote, ideologically consistent with conservative theory? So you end up with a result where states that want to can ban abortion, but women who live in those states are going to be able to get assistance to go to other states and obtain a safe abortion. I don't want to use maybe I shouldn't use that analogy, but one thinks about the Underground Railroad enabling slaves to get to free states.
Phyllis and Ron, did you have something?
Yes. Well, this is not either of your field, the question I'm going to ask, but it's something I'd like all of us to at least speculate on, start with Ann and Bob, which is, what do you think the effect of this decision is going to be on the fall elections?
Ann, why don't you go first?
I mean, I'm super optimistic. When that leak decision came out, I mean, I know it was horrible, and I know it's going to be horrible for most of the nation. And I was sitting in a meeting and I'm saying to everybody, this is great for Michigan because people are going to be pissed. And sure enough, it was. They said, I get it's horrible for everybody else. And we already knew it was going to be horrible. But I think it's going to drive people. I think my sense is going to be a blue wave, but I may be optimistic, but it's certainly, when I talk to people as we're collecting signatures, I mean, they're just livid. And so my hope is it drives people to vote, which is something else I say when I'm out collecting signatures. I'm like, we're going to get this on the ballot, and then you got to vote for it. So get out to the polls. So I don't know. What do you think, Bob?
Well, we don't know the effect, but let's talk about some possibilities. We know that turnout in midterm elections tends to be low. Older people vote, and I must say, it's one thing about old people want to be secure and they vote. They make a big difference. Young people, on the other hand, tend not to vote, especially vote in big numbers, especially in off-year elections. And then you have redistricting, which varies from state to state. It may be a wash. It may give some benefit to the Republicans, perhaps not a lot. The real question is, the way I put it, will white suburban women be motivated by reproductive freedom to get out and vote Democratic? Will young people who typically, as we say, don't vote a lot in off-year elections, see how this affects them, and they will be motivated to get out and vote? Now, if you know, the Republicans are trying to downplay the issue because they think that it will help the Democrats. We shall see. I think it's speculative. We just don't know. Now, what's going to happen when the Supreme Court comes down with its decision the end of June or early July? There will be protests all over the country. There will be demonstrations, hopefully led by young people. Now, the question is whether that can be galvanized and directed to vote, to register to vote, and to vote in the election. It is an unknown, especially where you have Biden with low popularity. I have in many ways think he is not an effective communicator. A lot of criticism of his work. I think he lives in a different era, not just because of age, but where you had more bipartisan effort in Congress, which I think is just totally gone. So we'll see what inflation is like. We'll see what the other issues are like. We'll see what the Ukraine situation is like. I mean, November is a long time away, but time moves on. I think that we just don't know what the effect is going to be.
Can I
Okay,
just add, I'd like to just add one thought,
go
which
ahead.
is the starting point of all this, of course, is there is clearly a 2-to-1 majority in the country in favor of abortion rights. It's not 51-49. It's, in terms of people, it could be 70-35, no, 66-34. It's a huge difference. The great majority of people in the country favor abortion rights. The question, of course, in relation to what Bob and Ann have just said, is how actively.
Well, it's not just that, though. It's how they're distributed. This is not a state by state. If you compared Texas or South Dakota or Idaho with New York or California and even Michigan, you would get very different results. I think that at least the politicians in red states assume that the public on the whole is not supportive of abortion or doesn't care enough. There was a time when the pro-life people would be very influential because they would vote solely on that issue. So the fact that there's national pull doesn't help us because, remember, unlike virtually every other country where the criminal law is national, in the United States, it is state. One of the things that I pointed out, this is before at least decision, just suppose a hypothetical that abortion was illegal in Michigan. Women living in the eastern part of the state could go across the river to Windsor. In Canada, the criminal law power is a national power, and there's no prohibition of abortion. Women living in the western part of the state could go to Chicago, which are 2 hours away. Women living in North Dakota or Idaho or Montana could go across the border into Canada where abortion is legal. So there are ways of coping with this. And I think Clarence Thomas says, well, you have to learn to live with decisions that you don't like. Well, I usually don't quote him. He is right in this sense. As a nation, we are going to have to live with a decision where reproductive freedom is no longer a constitutional right. There's going to be a battle to some extent, state by state. We're going to win it in Michigan, I'm pretty sure of that. And again, I keep coming back. We're going to have to enable women to get to blue states where they can have a safe and legal abortion.
Okay, I think this next question is for Anne. Are there key talking points or reasons that help the undecided to sign the Michigan reproductive petition?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, we find that it's one of the in this research has, you know, gone on for years, is turning to that I can't make that decision for somebody else. That's a decision that it's personal, it's private, it's a healthcare decision that has to be made between the person and their a medical professional. That I don't walk in anyone else's shoes. That is the kind of the wisdom of messaging, like that is kind of foundational to it. I can't make that decision for somebody else, and that we shouldn't put that in the hands of politicians. We need to keep that in the hands of the people. The person needs to make that decision for themselves. There's some thinking that there aren't persuadables. There aren't. It's funny. I mean, I'll ask anyone. I meet the guy that was doing construction on my kitchen. I'm like, Nick, will you please sign my petition? He's like, Ann, I just can't. It's just not my values. And I'm like, I get it. It's a tough one. It's controversial for some of you. I said, but I can't not allow people to have that choice. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, Nick. We're trying to put it to the voters so that they can have that choice. And like I could see like him wavering a bit, but I knew I was not going to persuade him. So the talking points though I use out in the field when I'm collecting signatures, it's usually like no thanks or give me that right now. I mean, I am so pissed and I can't believe we're doing that. I don't think I've ever convinced anyone, honestly. I think it's tough to do, but the national research wisdom over many years of this, looking at this issue as it's gotten chipped away at this rights in many ways throughout our nation. The experts that have been in this space for years say the most effective is I can't make that decision for anybody else. And I want that to be a private personal decision between the person and their healthcare provider. I don't walk in anyone else's shoes. What I do know is that every pregnancy, doctors will tell you, every pregnancy is different, and we can't take that decision away from a person or their medical professional. I hear that again and again and again from experts who've been in this space. I feel like I'm pretty new to it just in the last year of working on this ballot measure, but my colleagues who've been doing it and other experts around the nation who've been studying this, they say that's the most, like, come back to the personal, private decision. But I have yet to convince anyone who's, their mind's made up.
That suggests a comment that I want to make. We are talking about choice. We are not talking about abortion. The choice is whether or not to have an abortion. And as Ann said, that's up to the woman and her doctor. There was a time, it's much earlier, when the military put pressure on women in service to have abortions. And ACLU protected the right of women to stay in the service without having an abortion. Similarly, at least we know sometimes people do, where teenagers resist their parents' effort to have abortions. And parents cannot force their teenage daughters to have abortion. Men cannot force their partners whom they got pregnant to have an abortion. We are protecting reproductive choice, which means the choice to use contraception, the choice to choose sterilization if one chooses, the choice not to have an abortion, the choice to have an abortion. We want to make it very clear that the emphasis is on choice and not on abortion.
Right. Thank you. As Michigan proceeds to protect abortion rights, how will we manage the counter assaults and violence that may ensue, especially blocking clinics from providing services to patients?
No, I don't have an answer about that exactly. I do know one of our staunch supporters and is just a wonderful spokesperson is Renee Chelian, who you may have seen in the media many times, who is the founder and CEO of Northland Family Planning Center. She has several clinics, and I mean, she said, since Trump was in office, the attacks on their clinic is, the threats and the protests, they've, have just have grown exponentially. The assaults, but they're out there, they're not going away. And she said, if this ban were to happen, if repro was overturned in Michigan, their offices would close. Many offices will close. Obviously, clinics will close. She said ours would have. Of course, this preliminary injunction changes all that, but I don't know if the assaults will change. They've gotten more intense, but courageous people like Renee and her staff, they keep going, and they will keep going. I mean, it's incredible. But yeah, I don't have an answer to that, but they're not going to stop on both sides. I'm sure the assaults will continue, and folks like Renee will continue to fight back.
Right.
Also remember FACE, freedom of access to clinic entrances. There can be court injunctions against us. Now, again, ACLU is supportive of free speech. We are supportive of the right of anti-abortion people to peacefully protest, but they cannot interfere with the ability of women to access an abortion clinic. Again, free speech is always a problem. We support people protesting against abortion, people protesting against equality for gays and lesbians. Sort of the free speech side runs counter to our substantive side. Sometimes it's a little tricky, and some of us older people are more supportive of free speech than younger people. But the answer is that there is protection of the abortion clinics and no harassment of women going to clinics. And the courts have upheld rules requiring a safe distance. So you can't go up and confront a woman close to the entrance. So again, it's a balancing thing, but we do have to protect the freedom of access.
Okay, thank you. Mary Murphy? You have to unmute. Mary, you have to unmute. You're muted.
Okay, my concern is birth control. Does this also include birth control? Do you think that, pardon?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary. Finish your question.
No, but sorry. I've read in different articles that people still think that, like say an IUD, different birth controls that prevents conception, that's also a form of abortion. They shouldn't have it. And also the morning after pill. So where does this stand? Is that a possibility? I mean, that puts women back in the dark ages. I mean, this is just so wrong. I mean, preventive care isn't out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's proposed legislation in different states. Bob, you may have a better handle on that, but I know that you're absolutely right, Mary, that's the case. That's why our ballot measure, it's not just let's protect abortion, let's protect all things involving reproductive health, which includes contraception, which includes miscarriage care. So that's why it's so critical that we get this measure on the ballot and that we pass it.
Before you answer, Bob, let me ask the next question, because then you'll be able to give a more expansive answer. The basis of Roe was on the implied right to privacy under the US Constitution. What is the opinion likely to say about this right? What other rights are in jeopardy if the court rules there is no implied right to privacy, or if the court severely limits the right to privacy?
Really, there is no generic right to privacy. Rather, there are a series of privacy interests that are protected by the liberty provision of the Due Process Clause. And that is the basis of Judge Gleicher's decision, and that is the basis of Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court said in Roe that the right to abortion is protected by the Due Process Clause. So the answer is bodily integrity is protected by due process and by the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. But basically, it is the Due Process Clause of the Michigan Constitution. There's also a notion of equality because prohibition of abortion affects women. Now, the opponents say, well, there's some women and other women, but basically it is mainly due process, the right of the freedom of a woman to control her bodily integrity. So it's part of the liberty protected by the Due Process Clause. I think it's Article 8 of the Michigan Constitution.
Okay. And Stephen Permut or
Linda. The reason I didn't write in the chat box is because I am not exactly sure what the law is, but I am wondering if it can be answered. There is this ability for a group to have a petition, and I'm thinking that there might be a threat by the right to life, even with this, that there was this injunction on the 1931 law, that they might be able to come in and have enough signatures. And this is, I don't know what the wording of this, and I apologize, but there's the ability that the legislature can make a decision and write into law, and there can be no veto by the governor. And I'm wondering, I don't know if this would go more to, not to Robert, but to the other speaker. I apologize. I think it's Anne. Yeah, to Anne. Is this a threat that that you're aware of that can be used by the legislature to, if let's say the right to life decides to come in and make this petition, that the legislature just can make a decision to bring back this law?
Yeah. Yeah, Bob, it's a direct initiative. Is that what it's called, Bob?
There's a provision in the initiative law. You get a certain number of signatures on the ballot. The initiative goes to the legislature, and if they pass it, then it can't be challenged. The Michigan legislature did this with minimum wage and minimum wage and vacation leave, sick leave, and leave generally. They passed the law very, very narrow, and that kept it off the ballot. There will be a proposal, if they get enough votes, to have a constitutional provision that would prevent this. But it is possible, we're collecting enough signatures to get a ballot proposal, but that would be subject to the same constitutional challenge. So I don't think we need to be concerned about that.
Yeah, and I also think that, but that is right, and that they could do, they get enough signatures, is not as many as we need to get it on the ballot to amend the Constitution. It's the standard is much lower for the number of signatures. But my understanding, and I don't remember the details of that because we did talk that through, that they're too late, at least for this cycle, to do that. They wouldn't have enough time to get the signatures they need to do a direct initiative with the legislature, is my understanding. Could they do it another time? As Bob said, we'd sue. Just like when Betsy DeVos's, let my kids learn, when that is good, that will pass, they will get their signatures, it will go to the legislature, they will make law, and we will sue. But
Is there a way to, is there ever a potential to get rid of this? And is the ACLU potentially looking at, it's a terrible ability. Is
yeah,
there anything that can be done to try to get this, to get rid of this?
There is an initiative provision that would prevent the legislature from doing it, from keeping. See what it did. It kept the proposed legislation off the ballot, and there is a proposal for a constitutional amendment that would prevent the legislature from doing that. Also, the legislature will add a small appropriation, which keeps it off the ballot. This proposal would eliminate it. So, and they're actually, unfortunately, there are two competing proposals, both of which want to expand the voters' power. And where you have two competing proposals, the one that gets the most vote wins. So pay attention to that on the ballot as well.
yeah. I mean, are we considering it? We aren't. I remember bringing this up in one of our meetings, I don't know, months ago, and the legal director, Dan Karofkin, is in my head saying, no, and here's why. I forget the why. I'll ask Dan again, but I remember now and then a neighbor across the street regularly asked me, he's like, why is the ACLU trying to fight this? I forget the why. I will ask. But we're not considering it. My guess is it's similar like with free speech. There's competing tensions, right? Like, of course, there's abhorrent speech that we do not support, but yes, we fall on the side of free speech. But yes, there is speech that we despise. I think similarly, I think the reasoning is if there's initiative and the people are trying to collect signatures, do we really want to quell a people-driven effort? Is that the side we want to fall on? Even though we get that, like in the end, right? It's minority rules in those instances because they don't need, like we need, this higher threshold of signatures. I think that's why. But you and my neighbor are making me want to know and go back and ask. So I will find out.
Okay, next, do HIPAA laws come into play with any of this?
And what do you mean?
I don't know.
Who asked?
The question that's written. Is there any, I don't.
I'll chime in. I'm curious about how you have privacy with your doctor about everything else except this. I mean, we have these laws in place where you have privacy about your medical situations, but this one thing gets removed, or does that become dismantled completely in your privacy? Like what then becomes no longer private with your physician if we're taking your pregnancy away? Are there other things then? Does HIPAA just fall apart with this? I hope that makes sense then.
Bob, you know?
HIPAA maintains privacy of medical information. It's not really relevant here.
Well, if you have certain states where where you have to turn somebody in for having an abortion, and doctors are going to fear, so I think that there is a relevant confluence of these.
HIPAA is federal law, so that would preempt any state law to the contrary.
Okay.
But I don't have an answer. I trust, that makes sense, Bob. But I do see the contradiction that you're raising. I get it. It does seem super contradictory. Like we sign these documents to say, only so-and-so can see my medical records, nobody else. We sign these HIPAA things. And yet this, incredibly invasive government wants to control what's going on with me medically is outlandish.
Right. Okay, next question is for Bob. You say there's no generic privacy protection, just a series of privacy interests. Is every unenumerated right a similarly case-by-case situation?
Well, this is, the reason I say that is following the Griswold case, which recognized the right to privacy, the court has never recognized a specific right. That is to say, we talk about the right to reproductive freedom, which includes contraception, sterilization, abortion, many other things. Then we talk about the right to parent. Then we talk about the right to marry. Now, all of these things come within the due process guarantee of liberty. So I think we ought to think more in terms of liberty rather than a generic right of privacy.
Okay. And
Let me give one
go ahead.
example
Yep, go ahead.
of a case where I litigated and we lost. It was a right to physician-assisted death, assisted suicide. Supreme Court basically said the Constitution does not protect that right. And as a result, states can prohibit, as Michigan does, assistance in hastening death. So surely that is the right to choose to die is a privacy interest. Now, what happened is the court has recognized you have a right to confident adults have a right to refuse life-saving medical treatment. But that right doesn't extend to have a doctor assisting you to end your life. And yet, so that's why I say there's no generic right of privacy. There are specific liberty interests that are protected by the due process clause.
Right. The next question, why are abortions performed at storefront clinics rather than hospitals? I would say, I mean, I can answer that probably, that insurance is not going to pay if it's an abortion of choice.
Well,
If,
I think
on the other hand, there's a medical situation that required, then you would be hospitalized. And technically, even if you have a miscarriage and have to go in for the DNC, that would be typically done in a hospital. But the extremeness of the laws in this various states, as I understand it, would even put limitations on that.
Abortion is a very simple medical procedure. Most of the medical procedures that we get are performed in a doctor's office, not in a hospital. There always has to be a hospital backup. And that is why the court has struck down laws that make it difficult for doctors for GYNs to have hospital privileges. See, again, the hospitals want doctors who admit a lot of patients, and complications with abortion are exceedingly rare. So that's what, but you only need a hospital in case something goes wrong, which is exceedingly rare.
One thing I do want to add back to the question of folks asking, what are good talking points to convince people to support this, to support a bail measure. Personal stories, people explaining, like you just did, that so often it's a complicated pregnancy and it results in a necessary procedure that is really an abortion, but the person's going to miscarry anyway. They're going to, so, but personal stories are really powerful. And the challenge is, it's lifting the shame, the veil of shame around people telling those stories, which may be happening now with people coming forward as a result of this leaked decision, this draft decision, that people feel like, this is nonsense. This is a medical procedure. A friend the other day, I was like, hey, will you sign this? And she's like, hell yeah, I had 2 abortions. One was I had, and they were both critical. The baby was not viable. And so why, I wasn't going to deliver and then have this baby die. Another was another medical procedure, the complicated things. But people don't understand that. They think that, as I heard someone I was collecting at Eastern Market go on and on about these irresponsible women who get themselves pregnant. And it's frustrating. You're never going to convince that person.
Can't you convince that person that this issue should be on the ballot and it's their right to vote no on it? Even if it's on the ballot, but don't they want to have the right to vote on something rather than just have it slide off into?
Yeah. You would hope. I mean, it's worth a try. I mean, I would try anything to get, and I have put it to people. It's like, yeah, I think that's why we want to put it to the people. Let's put it to the people to vote, and you'll get to vote. Whether it's going to change their mind to sign, but it was crazy to me. My neighbor across the street, I said, we just want to put it to the people. She's like, I think it should be legal, but I can't sign that. And I just think, oh my God, do you hear yourself? An OBGYN neighbor too, another one. They're very Catholic. I understand. I grew up Catholic. I get it. But they were like, yeah, I just can't. And I just thought, I can't understand.
Yeah. This one just really pulls at everybody's
But
emotions.
It does. It's an emotional driven issue for a lot of people, but Michiganders, by and large, we are in the majority, just like we are nationally. We are in the majority. That's why I feel confident we get this on the ballot. We get people out voting. We will win.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the end of the questions. So I'd like to give you and Bob each an opportunity to make a closing remarks.
Bob, you want to go first?
You go first.
Get out and circulate a petition. Tell your friends, get the word out, collect signatures. We have a deadline. We really want to get these all done by July 1st, but please, we cannot do this alone. We would need to make Michigan a model for the rest of the country. And I get it that not everyone's going to have this ability to amend their constitution, but for those that can, let's be a model for the nation that Michigan is a safe haven for abortion rights, for everything reproductive health. We will be the first in the nation to have this incredibly expansive amendment in our constitution. And let's all work together to make it happen.
I just want to second that. Let's not rely on court decisions. For many years, we relied on Roe v. Wade, and now you see what's happening to it. Get it in the Constitution so that not only will it be a model for the nation, but women in Michigan can know my reproductive freedom is fully protected by my Constitution.
Thank you. And Linda, do you want to close it out?
Yes, thank you. This has been great. I think it's been really informative and firing us up as well to get out there. And speaking of getting out there, we as the Huntington Woods Peace Group want to help our members to do that, for you not only to sign the petition, but also get out, get more signatures distributed. So I'm going to put my email. If you would like to get the petitions, we will get them to you. We haven't figured out how. I mean, I was thinking of just having a particular day, but I could do it on an individual basis. So I'm going to also put my email in the chat, and let's see if I can do that.
You
And
can also go, Ann Mullen just put again the website in the chat, and you can call her also. You can go to that website and request the petitions to be delivered to your house. So Linda, maybe you just want to do that and get extras, and then other people can do it on their own too.
hey, we're going to give you a couple choices here. If you're whichever way makes you comfortable, just contact us, and we'd like to get as many people as possible doing that.
And I can suggest to you too, Linda, that maybe you just take those extras with you on Monday to 11 Mile and Woodward, and
Oh,
people
that's a
can
good
stop by and pick them up there, whether or not they stay for the demonstration.
Well, that's a good idea. So we'll be there. If you would like petitions to distribute and to get signatures for, we will have them at the corner of 11 and Woodward, right in front of the church there. I think it's St. John's, at 5:30, anytime between 5:30 and 6:30.
You know, it's easy. And one thing it feels everybody, it's so empowering. You're like, oh my God, I can do something about this. I'm going to do something about this. I collected almost 1,000 on between me and my friends in my neighborhood. So.
Yeah,
thank you.
that is what everyone says, that you just, when you start thinking about the people you know, they start coming to you and say, can I sign the petition? Everybody says it's the easiest petition you ever tried to get signatures for.
Yeah, we'll be down at Easter Market too. I'll be down there on Saturday. So it's like fish in a barrel. People want to sign.
Great.
Easiest
Yeah,
thing
all
you
the
ever did.
farmers markets, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Professor Sedler and Ann. This has been great. We appreciate you giving us your time and expertise. And we will do everything that we can. So you've made some inroads here. And I
Thank you.
think that's it. Thanks so much.
Take care,
And
everybody.
so long.